And just remember, this is your time for witness. And I'm going, duh. You know, I missed the whole point. That was my time for witness. Art did it for me. Now I know that I don't have to let art do it for me. By the way, do you know why all Irishmen have droopy shoulders and flat foreheads? Anybody know?
They carry the weight of the world.
Pardon?
They carry the weight of the world.
Well, that's one of the things, you carry the weight of the world, but the physical reason is because when you ask them a question, they go, I don't know, you tell them the answer, they go, that's right! all right, we're gonna wind this thing up before we... Okay, what I've learned from Dan, especially in his book, well, we're in Catonsville now, right? Okay, you all know what happened in Catonsville. Well, after they wrapped up this unruly lot and put them in the only federal building in Catonsville, which at that time was the post office, okay? They're sitting around there, and I know this from Dan's autobiography, and Dan shares his ruminations. He says, now, this is really going to be odd and awkward, because everybody's going to be calling us stupid, crazy, traitors, and worse. So was this worth doing? They're going to say, what did you think you were doing? What good comes of this? And so Dan says, I thought about that a lot, and I finally came to the realization that assuming the right moral preparation, the good is worth doing because it's good. Okay? Success is not unimportant, but it's secondary. The good of the act speaks for itself. And I thought, wow, says Dan, that's good. That's good for me. And I relaxed into that. And I thought, wow, as long as I remember that success, results are not paramount, they're not unimportant, but they're not paramount. That the good is worth doing because it's good. I want to share something here. I was cleaning out, I'm an old pack rat, and every now and then when I clean out some old papers, I come across something that I really am glad that I saved. And many years ago, about 10 years ago, I wrote an article and I got a comment. I like to read the comments when I have time because it's really interesting. So this comment, and I'll just read it to you, it's very brief. Our family explored what it means to seek peace when we invited a young Muslim student to dinner in our home a few days after September 11, 2001. And one of our sons asked our guest how she came to be in America. She said, my father came here on a work visa, and when the trouble came, 9/11 and the reaction, he told us to pack up and return home because he was afraid of how Americans might treat us. So we were packing up, and then a few nights before we were to leave, he was watching the news on television. There was a group of people outside the White House protesting American military action. A large hostile crowd watched the protesters, and between the two groups were dozens and dozens of police. My father watched for a long time. Then he turned off the TV and he turned to the family and said, unpack your bags, we're staying. Nowhere else in the world would you find police who would protect protesters. Now, that was 12 years ago. At their best, they still do that. The idea is that he thought the worst was coming, but he still believed enough in America to see that laws could be kept by what we used to call the organs of state security, homeland security folks, and that kind of thing. And he said, well, let's stay. So, let me wrap up here in just a little while. One of the things about the Catonsville post office is a really great story. It's true, I get it again out of Dan's book, but they're sitting around, okay? And in walked, Dan's a poet as well as a, kind of a spiritual guy and all. And in walks, in Dan's words, the paradigm of a George FBI inspector. He walks in the door, and his eyes light on my brother Phil. Phil's his husband. He looks at Phil and he says, "Oh, you again? I'm gonna change my religion." And Dan comments, "No greater tribute could be made to my brother Phil." Now, what's the point of that story? The point of that story is that you have to keep your sense of humor. If you're in this for the duration, you're not going to last very long if you don't keep your sense of humor. And Dan was able to do that and to have such an incredible recounting of such very strong events. Now, I'd like to just tell a little story out of my experience with Germans. I lived there for 5 years. And most of you know about Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Well, about the same time that Bonhoeffer was wrapped up and put in prison in Berlin, there was another fellow named Albrecht Haushofer. Has anyone heard of Albrecht Haushofer? Good. Okay, well, I'm going to tell you. He was a geolog, a geologist at the University of Berlin. Now, he had tenure. Some of you know what that means, right? So, the way he got tenure in this plum position was by keeping his mouth shut. And he kind of knew that, but tenure's tenure, right? When his Jewish neighbors and political dissidents were being wrapped up, he tried to ignore it, but finally his conscience got the better of him, and he started his own little protest. He gathered a following, and he became a threat to the German authorities. So they wrapped him up at the same time they did Bonhoeffer. They put him in a different prison. Now, the Germans would either shoot you or hang you. Bonhoeffer, they hanged. Albrecht Haushofer was in the prison where they shot you. But in either case, before they would kill you, you had to sign a confession. I mean, Germans are very orderly. Of course, they wouldn't kill you unless you admitted to your guilt, right? Well, Haushofer wouldn't have any of that at all. He said, "I don't want to sign a confession." Now, as the Allies came, it was about a week away, they shot him anyway. But as they picked him up from the floor, out of his pocket fell a little settle, okay? A little piece of paper, okay? Guess what it was? It was his confession. Do any of you know German?
Yes.
Well, you do?
A little bit.
Good. Okay. Well, he wrote it in the form of a sonnet. It's very brief, so let me read it to you and then I'll translate it as we go along. Schuld was the title. Schuld means guilt, okay? So it's his confession. Doch bin ich schuldig, aber anders als ihr denkt. Yeah, I'm guilty, but it's not what you're thinking. Ich musste früher meine Pflicht erkennen. I should have earlier recognized my duty. Ich musste schärfer Unheil nennen. I should have more sharply called evil. Mein Urteil habe ich zu lang gelenkt. I put off my judgment far too long. Ich habe gewarnt. He did warn. Aber nicht genug. Enough. Und klar. Clear. Okay, klar. Claro. Clear. There's no other word in German for clear. And it doesn't have a, stronger sense. So, ich habe gewarnt, aber nicht genug und klar. Und heute weiß ich, was ich schuldig war. So, I did warn, but not enough, and not clearly enough. Und heute, and today, I realized what I was guilty of. I don't want to exaggerate, but I will tell you that my feeling is we're at that point right now in this country. There's incipient fascism. It manifests itself in all kinds of ways. And if we, people who are adults, do not stand up, we can't find our voice, then our children are not going to save us because they don't know much better. Now, there are stalwarts like Liz and her crew, and like many of you. I'm going to finish with a poem by Dan Berrigan. It's one that I found on the wall of the Catholic Worker in the Bowery of New York, where I was staying. I like to stay there if there's an empty place to stay when I go up for my various trials and appear before the judge. Last time I appeared before the judge because I was trying to get in to hear General Petraeus speak, and they wouldn't let me, and I protested, so they beat me up pretty bad, put me in the Tombs, the terrible prison there at the bottom of Manhattan. So after they thought better, they dropped the charges, but in New York you can't drop charges because the police are never wrong, so they give you what they call an ACD. That's let's see, adjournment in contemplation of dismissal. So the pro bono lawyer that my Catholic worker friends called up at 10 o'clock at night and asked to come up for my arraignment the next morning, she did. And she said, now Ray, when the judge says that you're going to be given an adjournment in contemplation of dismissal, this is no time for a speech, Ray. I don't know where she got the idea I would make a speech, but she said, no statement. Could you please, just this one time, just say, when she says, do you understand, Mr. McGovern, what this means? Namely, that you have to be a law-abiding citizen for the next 6 months? Just say, yes, Your Honor, okay? Could you please just say it? So sure enough, the judge says, Mr. McGovern, you understand, do you not, that you have to become a law-abiding citizen for the next 6 months? Do you understand that? All I could do is just say, yes, Your Honor. But I did it. That's all I said, okay? Now, in the process of all this, I'm staying at the Catholic Worker. Kathy Brain's room, she was away in the Middle East, and I see this thing on the wall. It's a poem by a fellow named Dan Berrigan. And it just spoke to me, so I jotted it all down, and I'd like to read it to you. It's very brief. The title, it was produced in just 40 copies, and was really meant as a tribute to one of Dan's dearest friends, okay? This is what the title is Some, like Some, S-O-M-E. Some stood up once and sat down. Some walked a mile and walked away. Some stood up twice, then sat down. I've had it, they said. Some walked 2 miles, then walked away. It's too much, they cried. Some stood and stood and stood. They were taken for fools. They were taken for being taken in. Some walked and walked and walked. They walked the earth, they walked the waters, they walked the air. Why do you stand, they were asked, and why do you walk? Because of the children, they said, and because of the heart, and because of the bread, because the cause is the heartbeat in the children born and the risen bread. Daniel Berrigan, S.J. I would add one thought here, and that is that I noticed that some of you are almost as old as I am. Don't take any offense at that. Maybe not almost, but some of you are approaching my age. Now, I can tell that because of the hair, okay? That was the worst thing that happened to me the first time I was arrested. When they put us in prison, in jail really, there was this young 17-year-old policeman now. He must have been 20, he looked 17. He says, McGovern. So I came out of the thing and he said, all right, what's your name? McGovern. All right, okay. Okay, color eyes. Hazel. He looked down, there was a box for hazels, which I do. Color hair, brown. He said, look, McGovern, I can hold you here all weekend. Color hair. I said, brown, I always say brown. He says, go down to the men's room over there and look in the mirror, will you please? So I'm down in the men's room and look in the mirror. And oh, damn. Oh, damn. So I always say brown. So I went back and I said, all right, gray. It's not gray, that's white, McGovern. Now get back in the cell. Okay, that was the worst thing that happened to me. Now, why do I mention that? Let me remember. Okay, this is why. Because one of the times I was arrested and beaten up was when Hillary Clinton was giving a major speech in Washington. All I did was stand up and I turned my back on Hillary Clinton. Didn't say a word, didn't shout out anything, didn't have a placard or anything like that. And I had my Veterans for Peace t-shirt on, and it got a lot of notoriety with my friends in Veterans for Peace. So they said, hey, Ray, we want to do a commemorative t-shirt for you. Now, what would you like on the back of your t-shirt? You're allowed one quote and then something you said. So I picked one from this fellow, Dan Berrigan. What he said was, you should hit the whole thing about this. This was a college commencement, okay? He was asked to speak, make the commencement address to the college commencement, and he got up and he said, know where you stand and stand there. And went back and sat down. That was the commencement address. So that's what I said, my friends and Veterans for Peace. Know where you stand and stand there. And then my little quote was, we stand against endless wars. And the shirt was issued in honor of me for commemorating the address for standing silently with my back to Hillary Clinton while she spoke in defense of freedom of expression in Iran. Okay. So what's this business about the gray hair? Well, Hillary Clinton got thousands and thousands of telegrams and emails and telephone calls. Why? Because Americans don't like old people getting beat up. And the word went out, 71-year-old man arrested, beaten, you know. So, what am I saying here? Well, you have an advantage, you people with not brown hair anymore. People don't like to see you beaten up. Young kids, you know, I have a comment to them, you know, they're asking for it. But old people, they really don't like that. Now, they're not going to beat you up, they're not going to break your bones usually, or, you know, really hurt you. So, all I'm saying is that you got a special advantage if you want to put it into play, and now's the time. You only have about 10, 20, 30 more years to use this to your advantage. And I suggest that that way you can join these people that Dan Berrigan calls the sum. You can know where you stand and stand there. Thank you very much for your patience.
Paulette, how much time do we have for questions?
We have none, we should head it out.
We have no time for questions.
I'm sorry. Well, I mean, you can go ahead, but I need help putting packets together.
Maybe 10 minutes. Would you like to do questions? Can you stay that long? Stay. We don't want you to have to leave.
Huh? You got a curfew.
Okay, so Ray and Elizabeth, can you come up here for questions? Yeah. like to help Paulette with doing packets, you're excused to help her. Anyone has a question would like to start with? Ray, I did want to ask about that Sam Adams group. You want to tell us what that is?
Yeah, actually, this gives me a chance to say something that if I don't say, my youngest son will kill me. He set up a website for me, and it's called McGovern.com. And if you go on that website, you'll see all about Sam Adams, because I put a thing up today that explains the whole thing. In short, Sam Adams was a colleague of mine at CIA. He determined that there were twice as many, quote, enemy, end quote, under arms in Vietnam as General Westmoreland would admit to. General Westmoreland lied through his teeth, and Sam Adams never was able to get that word out. And so the war just wore on, and nobody really supported Sam. And he, in those days, it just was not an option for him to whistle blow, because that was so much against the ethos of intelligence work. So Sam Adams is honored every year with an honorary award given to a person who demonstrates integrity in intelligence work. And we just gave our 14th award out this past January in Berlin.
I have a question, and that is, there are so many things, I think that Liz had mentioned, so many different things that have, not been going very well. And I think you also mentioned, that things aren't looking really well right now. But the problem is there's so many things. What are your thoughts on where we should really focus most of our attention? I mean, should it just be each individual focus on whatever grabs his or her attention on that? Or kind of what this whole idea of MUPJ is about, is like trying to get all these peace and justice activists together and coordinate and kind of cooperate on some things here. And if that's the case, is there one thing that we should put at the most, like, for really focusing on, or not?
I think they're all interrelated. And the issue would be to try to unpack some of those interrelationships. The priority for me is war and weapons of war. But that doesn't mean I don't walk with my neighbors when they've been brutalized by cops. I don't recognize what this whole system has done to them and how it has reduced their quality of life. And it also means I don't ignore what's happening to the earth and the animals and the climate. I think we have to weave our way as best we can in the midst of it all and understand the interrelationships.
Yeah, I just was with Carl Weiss, one of the leaders of the anti-war movement back during Vietnam, and she said, never do anything alone. And I think that's really, who is it? There's a famous author, Charles Dupuy, who said, we need to struggle together, we need to approach heaven together. What would God say if some of us came without the others? Our ethos at the Church of the Savior is that you form small groups around the concept called call or vocation. That's where your particular interests and your passion intersects with a need in the world, okay? And you figure that out. Sometimes it takes months or even years to figure out, what your passion is and what your education or what your talents are, or it intersects with a real need in the community. And then you gather around people that share that vision and you do something, The big thing is to meet every week That's a big commitment. But you will find that if you gather 4, 5, 6, no more than 7 maybe, you know, no more than 7, but then the only requirement in my view is to make sure there are at least a couple women in that group. Because I've found out over the last 12 years it's the women that not only have a lot of vision, but most of the guts in this country, okay? So we get together every week, right? And what happens? We get to know each other so well that out of that little synergy comes ideas you never would have thought of by yourself. And when that happens, there's 2 things, real important things. There's support, mutual support. Let's say you're going to go see your congressperson on Thursday, and you say that. And you know darn well, the next time you meet, your friends are going to say, oh, how'd that go with your congressman? Okay? So it's not only support, but it's accountability. And this sounds trite, but it isn't. I've seen it work. You don't do anything alone. You do it with a small group. Sometimes the small groups get together into larger groups, but it all starts with a small group of committed people. I guess, who was it, the anthropologist? Margaret Mead said nothing, and nothing has really, how'd she say, nothing has really progressed socially unless there's been a small group of people pushing it. So think small, but then, you know, in the smallness, you can have incredible visions. And I've seen, you know, seen what can happen from people who support each other and hold each other accountable.
One more question, or any more questions for our guests? Yes.
Well, while you and Liz were talking, I was thinking about the Pope's upcoming visit. And one of the things that seems to be necessary, I know individuals can do things, but it's often a spiritual leader. I mean, we have Gandhi, we have Martin Luther King, and now we have the blessings of Pope Francis. And what I would really like to see was the Pope say something kind of echoing what you're saying, Liz, when he addresses Congress. Acknowledging that he's in a congressional body, and he says the laws are legal. But in your heart, are they fair? Are they just? Are they right? And just get that for a reflection. And what are they fair, just, and right for? Are they right for the poor? Are they right for the vulnerable? Are they right for the earth?
Good.
And I don't think he's going to just concentrate on the earth issues. Although we are expecting this encyclical, and of course that, but the whole idea of having someone face the powers and bring up a change of heart. Because really that's what we're talking about. What, you know, unless you change the heart, no matter what you do, it's not enough. So I would hope that we would have some leadership from the Pope along this line. What do you think?
The way to draft that statement, and let's start circulating it and get it to him, you know, with lots of signatures. This is what's needed. All right? Yeah.
This is a different subject. I was just going to speak up for, I think what Ray said about acting with others is a good thing, but only if you can do it. I think to say never act by yourself, Bonhoeffer acted pretty much by himself. Hilkun Zassenhaus acted by herself and ended up freeing hundreds and hundreds of prisoners from Nazi camps. George Ossenson did a classroom action by himself. So if you can't find some group to work with, you do what you can. And I'm blocking on his name, but there was a young engineer who was killed in Nicaragua many years ago.
Yes.
And he said,
Ben Linder.
Ben Linder, he said, whatever you can do is needed here. So whatever you can do, with as much discernment as you can determine, do that. Some people, especially in America, which is a very isolated country, you may not be able to find that group with the Church of the Savior or anything like it. If you wait for that, you may never do anything.
I do think, though, that knowing something about the church community you were talking about, people are organized into small groups that meet weekly, and then something comes out of it. And that's a nice
If you
way
can
to
do
go
it,
about
sure.
it, if you can do it.
Good.
Mhm. Thank you.
Well, Joyce has a little something we'd like to offer you, or what?
Just a small token of our appreciation. Thank you for what you guys have been talking about and what we're all here for.
Nice, wow.
Okay?
Thank you so
And,
much.
you know, we all have the gray and white hair. But these
Yeah, but you
posters,
color it.
but these posters are usually for the teens, so I hope they make you feel.
Terrific.
They were fun.
I would hope what the Pope says, they say, oh, Mr. Ryan, you're a really good Catholic. Come on up here. Have you read the Bishop's pastoral statement on the U.S. economy? You're head of the Budget Committee. You're a very prominent Catholic. Have you read the U.S. Bishop's statement? Oh, sure, I have. Well, how does it define the How does it define the preferential option for the poor? It says poor have nothing but themselves to blame and they should pull themselves up by the bootstraps. I don't think so, Mr. Ryan. Let me suggest you go back and read it, because what it says is this. And this was a very gutsy thing. This goes back to 1984, right? Last time we had a good bunch of American bishops. What they said was this. You've heard a lot about the preferential option for the poor. We're going to tell you what it is. What it is no one is entitled to accumulate still more of what he or she doesn't need when others lack the bare necessities of life. That's what it means. Mr. Ryan, got that? You want to repeat that? That's what I'd like to see the Pope do, huh? What do you think?
Any and all.
Yeah, some of those nuns on the bus would be nice to have in the gallery. Thank you so much.
Really great. Thanks, Ray. Thanks, Elizabeth. Really appreciate you coming out and getting our conference off to a great start. And thank you.
Okay.